I'm going to do a quick tutorial on using the AWAMS plotting function. Before I show you the plot, I'll show you what data I'm using. It's just some demo data, and it comes with your program. It's in the AWAMS Photos Demos Patient Directory. It just simulates 4 measurements, 2 wounds, outside perimeter area of wound 1, and inside and outside and inside of wound 2. Now, just so you understand what's happening in the plots, if I go to a later report, the areas are getting progressively smaller. That's not real data. Those are just circles I drew and I measured them so I could use them for demonstration. Now I'm going to go to plot form 1, get report. I'll just read in 4 of these so that we have something to look at. Okay, we have 4 lines on the plot. The red is area 1. There's a little key down here. Area 2 is green. That's wound 1 outside and inside measurement. Blue and yellow are the same for wound 2. Now if I want to show all the data, I can. By show all, I can hide it all here. Likewise, I can show it one at a time. And I can also hide any of them that I want. Now the other thing you can do when you start getting a lot of data up here, it's hard to keep track of. So you can grab it and drag it around a little if it helps you tell which lines it corresponds to. Sometimes that's useful. Now, just to simplify this, I'm going to hide the second wound and look at wound 1. So we've got wound 1 outside and inside measurements. These add up. The total area of the wound should be what these add up to, and they add up to 4.1 centimeters. If I then go out and look at the primary area of wound 1, I can hide line 2 because it's not being used. This is the overall area of wound 1. I could do the same for wound 2, which is line 3, show the overall area. So that's one thing you can do. Another plotting menu item is the percent wound. In this case, we're looking at wound 1, and outside and inside should always add up to 100%, but you might be interested, for example, if the outside is corresponding to granulated tissue, you might be interested to know what percentage of the wound that is. And that doesn't say anything about the overall area of the wound, just the percentage. If you go back to the individual areas, it's telling you how much area each of the tissue type measurements are. Okay, now a little more about the plot. We've got 3 labels, and you can change these labels. They have default values, but for example, you might want to write centimeter squared on the y-axis. Date is on the x-axis, and the report automatically corresponds, or it automatically reads in the date that the report was generated and puts it on the x-axis. So that also gives you a little timeline as far as how linear the progression should be. And if you do them at regular intervals, you'll see more how the wound is actually healing. Otherwise, the plot gets skewed a little bit. Now, on the individual areas, you might want to say wound 1 in this case, because we're just looking at wound 1. A couple other things you can do. If you right-click, you get a menu. You can save this into a directory, and then you can later load it into AWAMS if you want. You can also copy it and put it in a Word file. You can print it directly to a printer, and you can also manipulate individual data points. For example, if I go down to the data point label R1 and pick the first date, select it, options, say I don't want to show the data point, so the data point goes away. Notice that. I can also get to that menu by double-clicking on it, on the data point itself, and then I can manipulate it that way if I want, or I can also change my line. So that is just quick tutorial. Now, something else that you might wonder about are how many buttons show up here. it's going to show up to 8 buttons depending on how many buttons you read into the chart. So I have one quick sample where I've put in 8 lines, and you'll notice you get 8 buttons. Now, in this case, some of the lines are have small areas, so they're not showing. That's 7 and 8. So if I show them, I can differentiate which line was, or what the areas actually were. So if I, for example, hide 8, I can see that this was line 7 if I'm corresponding it back to an actual plot. But unfortunately on the scale, because it's a linear scale, sometimes they get overlapping. So if I hide line 7, now I'm just looking at line 8. If I show line 7, you notice it's a little bigger, but it's overlapping. Show the data. Show line 7. So there's different ways to keep track of it. Hopefully that gives you a clue how to use this. There's a lot of power there once you play with it. If you have any questions, give me an email.